born, God said that the boy was going to be trouble. His grandfather was the most important man in the Old Testament. And in terms of religion, his grandfather was the most important man in terms of the world ever. His grandfather was Abraham, and from Abraham would come three major world religions. The Jewish religion, of course, would come from Abraham, but so would the Muslims, or Islam. It would come from Abraham as well, from one of his children. And of course, Christianity would flow from Judaism. So the three biggest religions in the world were all because of this man Abraham, who was extremely flawed. As a matter of fact, every character in the Bible, except for Jesus the Christ himself, every character in the Bible was highly flawed. So Abraham had a son whose name was Isaac, and now Isaac has his wife Rebekah, to the point that they're about to have these twins. And before the twins are born, God actually gives a message and says these boys are actually fighting in the womb. That was figurative to indicate that they will always be enemies. They're always going to fight. And that they will have a problem when they're born. And that unlike the way it is in our culture, where the younger son would be subservient to the older son, this one's going to be just the opposite, where the older son is going to be subservient to the younger son. And they're going to have conflict, not just them, but their descendants. So these twin boys, they were not identical twins, they were fraternal twins. I would imagine that sometimes it may be difficult, at least at the very outset, to differentiate between identical twins, but fraternal twins usually are much easier, but these fraternal twins are going to be much, much easier because the first one, the one who was born first, Esau, was not only full head of hair when he was born, he had hair over his whole body, red hair over his whole body, so you can easily identify him from the next one. But you understand, by the custom of the day, the son that is born first will get a double share of the blessing. What that means is he'll get twice as much inheritance as all the other boys, however many boys there may be. He's going to get twice the blessing from his father. And so being the firstborn was a big deal. And as the first son, Esau, the one covered with the red hair, is being born, the other one, that they're going to name Jacob for a reason, that little infant coming into the world grabbed his brother's foot and was pulled into the world that way, so that in essence he could say, well, you were kind of born first, but I was born at the same time because I was hanging on to you. So they named him Jacob, the deceiver. And that's the name he would live up to for the rest of his life. These two boys interacted differently with the world. Esau, the red-headed Esau, was an outdoorsy guy. He learned how to be very proficient with his bow. He loved to be out there doing all those kinds of things, hunting, being the rough and tough and tumble kind of guy. He was also a pretty impulsive kind of guy who would act first and then later regret what he did. On the other hand, his younger brother, Jacob, was a very contemplative sort of person, who he didn't like to go out and hunt. He would stay where the tents were. He would think, he would reason, he would do things. He was a guy who would process before he acted, like Esau was a guy who would act before he processed. It turned out that Daddy, Isaac, liked Esau better because that just was, it appealed to him. I like this hunter son that goes out and is the masculine guy and takes over the world. Mama, Rebekah, liked the younger son because he was quiet and loved to contemplate and think and those kinds of things. It's not unusual that one parent might identify with one child more than the other, but that definitely happened with these kids. When they got older, it came time when Isaac was sick. It appeared he was going to die. Actually, he didn't die. He was going to live a lot longer, but it looked like he was going to die. And so it was time now, and as he'd gotten older, he'd lost his eyesight. He couldn't see very well at all. And he was about to give his blessing to his oldest son because he thought death was imminent. It's going to be more than 20 years later, but he thought death was imminent. And so he calls Esau in and said, it's time for me to give you the double blessing because you're the older boy. But what I want you to do first is this. I love the way you cook the food that you kill. So go out there.